Hey everyone, and welcome back to Chat Like a Native. You know we're all about helping you sound more and more like a, well, native English speaker.
That's right.
And today we're tackling a topic that I know can be a bit intimidating for some learners.
Oh, yeah.
Grammar.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you don't need to become a grammar expert to speak English fluently.
Sure.
It's more about understanding the key structures that native speakers use every day.
Yes, and the ones that will really make a difference in how natural you sound.
Right. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in this deep dive. So if you've ever felt like grammar is holding you back, or if you just want to boost your confidence, stick with us.
Absolutely.
We're going to break things down in a way that makes sense and give you practical tips to help you really internalize these essential grammar points.
And you'll see that grammar can actually be, well, fun and super useful once you see how it all fits together.
Okay, so let's start with something that often trips learners up, verb tenses. We've got all these different tenses: present simple, present continuous, past simple, present perfect. It can feel overwhelming.
Right, like when do you use which one? It can be tricky.
But really, the key is to think about the meaning each tense conveys. So let's take the present simple, for example. Like if you say, I work in IT.
Mm-hmm.
What are you really telling someone? You're describing something you do regularly, like a routine or a habit. It's a statement about a general truth in your life.
Exactly. It's not about what's happening right this second. It's more about the big picture, a state of being, if you will.
Yeah.
Now, compare that to the present continuous, like I'm reading your email right now. This is all about action in progress, something that is happening at the very moment you're speaking.
Right, and it doesn't have to be happening that second.
Mm-hmm.
It could be something happening around that time or something temporary.
Yeah, like I'm learning to play the guitar means I'm taking lessons, practicing, but I'm not necessarily holding a guitar at this exact moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then when we look to the past, we have the past simple. I visited London in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
A finished action, over and done with at a specific time.
Right. It's like a snapshot of the past.
Yeah.
A completed event, no connection to the present.
Right, whereas the present perfect, like I've spoken with our UK office today, feels like it bridges the past and present somehow.
Exactly. It often describes experiences or recent events that still have relevance now. Like that UK office example. You spoke to them earlier today, and maybe the conversation is still on your mind, or the information they gave you is still relevant to what you're doing now.
I see what you mean. It's that sense of it having an impact on the now.
Yeah, exactly. Or you might say, I've been to Paris. That means at some point in your life you visited Paris. It doesn't matter exactly when. It's the experience itself that's important.
So present perfect connects the past to the present somehow.
Uh-huh.
And then there's the future. We often use will for those spontaneous decisions, those things that pop into your head in the moment.
Right. You suddenly decide, oh, I'll call you back later.
Exactly. There's no plan in place.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an immediate reaction. And it can also be used to make predictions about the future without necessarily making a plan.
Yeah, you might say, it will rain tomorrow, based on the weather forecast.
Right. And then we have going to, which often indicates a plan or intention that you've made before. Like, I'm going to send that report tomorrow. You've already made the decision to do it.
Right. There's a sense of premeditation.
Okay, so we've covered the basic verb tenses, but what about modals? These are those little helper verbs that add nuance and express things like ability, advice, or obligation.
Yeah, they're so important.
Let's start with can and could. Can is often used for ability, right?
Yep. If you say, I can speak English, you're telling someone you have the ability to speak English.
Right. Now, what about could?
Well, could can also refer to ability, but often in the past. Like, I could run a mile when I was younger.
Oh, interesting.
But we also use could to make polite requests or suggestions.
So instead of saying, can you help me with this, which might sound a bit too direct. Yeah.
You can say, could you help me with this? Which sounds more polite.
Exactly. It softens the request.
Right. Now, what about should and ought to? I always get these two confused.
Well, they're very similar in meaning.
Yeah.
Both are used to give advice or make recommendations.
Yeah.
Like, you should really try that new restaurant, or you ought to get more sleep.
Okay, so they both express advice or a suggestion.
But should is much more common in everyday speech.
Right.
Ought to can sound a bit more formal, like
Yeah.
if you're giving serious advice.
I see. And sometimes I feel like ought to even implies that, you really should do something.
Yeah, there can be a sense of moral obligation with ought to.
Right. And then we have must and have to, both of these express obligation.
Yes, but must often comes from an internal sense of obligation. Like, I must remember to call my mother. It's something you feel you need to do yourself.
Oh, so it's like a personal obligation. Yeah. And then have to often implies an external obligation. Like, I have to go to work tomorrow. That's not really a personal choice.
It's an external requirement.
Exactly. But in everyday conversation,
Yeah.
people often use must and have to interchangeably.
Yeah.
So don't worry too much about the subtle difference.
Okay, so that covers modals.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to conditionals. These are sentences that talk about hypothetical situations, like, if I had $1 million, I'd travel the world.
Right.
Or they can talk about real possibilities, like, if it rains tomorrow, I'll stay home.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the zero conditional. This type of conditional expresses a general truth or a fact, like, if you heat water to 100 degrees Celsius, it boils.
Right. It's a cause and effect relationship that always holds true.
Yeah. It's something that always happens under certain conditions.
Exactly. Now, the first conditional talks about a specific situation in the future that is likely to happen if a certain condition is met.
So, for example, if I finish my work early, I'll go to the movies.
Exactly. It's a real possibility, not just a hypothetical situation.
And then we have the second conditional, which talks about hypothetical or unlikely situations in the present or future.
Right, like if I had $1 million example.
Exactly. It's often used to express wishes or regrets.
Yeah, like if I had studied harder, I would have gotten a better grade.
Oh, that's a good example. So second conditional takes us into the realm of imagination.
Mm-hmm. It lets us explore alternative realities.
Okay, so we've got zero, first, and second conditionals. They all deal with hypothetical situations to different degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's move on to something that seems simple but can actually be quite tricky. Articles. Those little words a, an, and the.
Yeah, a lot of learners struggle with articles.
I know. So when do we use a or an?
Well, we use a or an before a singular countable noun when we're talking about any one of that nouns.
So like, I need a pen could be any pen.
Exactly. And we use a before words that start with a consonant sound and an before words that start with a vowel sound.
Right. So it's a book, but an apple.
Exactly. It's all about the sound, not just the letter. Now, the is used before a singular or plural noun when we're talking about something specific.
Like the book on the table means that specific book, not just any book.
Exactly. Or the sun, because there's only one sun.
Right. And then there are times when we don't use any article at all.
Yes. That's called the zero article.
Okay. And when does that happen?
We often use the zero article with uncountable nouns like water or information when we're talking about them in general.
So you wouldn't say a water or the information in those cases.
Right. It would just be water is essential for life or information is power.
I see. It's about general concepts or categories.
Exactly.
Okay, articles. They're small but mighty. They can really change the meaning of a sentence. Now let's move on to prepositions.
Okay.
These little words can be really challenging because there are so many of them, and their meanings can be quite subtle.
Yeah, and they're not always logical.
Exactly. So what's the best way to learn prepositions?
Well, one way is to think about them in categories. We have prepositions of time like at, on, and in.
Mm-hmm.
We have prepositions of place like at, on, in, under, above, and so on.
Wow, there are a lot of them.
Yeah. And then we have prepositions of movement like to, from, into, out of, and so on.
So you can think about prepositions in terms of where, when, and how something is happening.
Exactly. And another good way to learn them is to learn them in chunks, like interested in, good at, afraid of.
Right. So you're learning the preposition along with the words it usually goes with?
Exactly. Because prepositions often combine with other words to create specific meanings.
Right. Like at by itself doesn't tell you much, but at home, at work, at the park, these all have specific meanings.
Exactly. So learning them in chunks can be really helpful.
Okay. And finally, let's talk about phrasal verbs.
Oh, yeah.
These are those verbs that combine with a preposition or adverb to create a new meaning.
Like turn on, turn off, turn up, turn down.
Right, so the same verb can have many different meanings depending on the preposition or adverb that follows it.
Exactly. And phrasal verbs are super common in spoken English.
Yeah.
So it's really important to learn them.
But how do we learn them? I mean, there's so many of them.
Well, one way is to group them by verb, like we just did with turn.
Mm-hmm.
So you can learn all the different phrasal verbs that go with turn, then all the ones that go with take, and so on.
Right. And another good tip is to pay attention to how native speakers use them in context.
Yeah. Like if you hear someone say, I'm going to look up that word,
Yeah.
that look up means to search for information.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Verb tenses, modals, conditionals, articles, prepositions, and phrasal verbs.
Wow.
These are all essential grammar structures that you need to understand if you want to speak English fluently.
And the good news is that you don't have to memorize every single rule. It's more about understanding the basic concepts and then practicing using them in real-life situations.
Exactly, because the goal is not to be a grammar expert. The goal is to be able to communicate effectively in English.
And to do that, you need to be able to use these structures naturally without thinking too much about the rules.
Right. It should just become second nature to you. And one of the best ways to do that is to immerse yourself in the language as much as possible.
Yes, absolutely.
So listen to English podcasts, watch English movies and TV shows, read English books and articles, and talk to native English speakers as much as you can.
The more you expose yourself to the language, the more natural these structures will become to you.
Right. And don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Everyone makes mistakes when they're learning a new language.
Exactly. Mistakes are part of the learning process. The important thing is to learn from your mistakes and keep practicing.
And remember, the more you practice, the better you'll get. So keep at it.
Absolutely.
And don't forget to have fun along the way.
Yes, because learning English should be enjoyable.
Exactly. All right, that's it for today's deep dive on Chat Like a Native. Thanks for listening.
Bye for now.